welcome to the voboss podcast. I'm your host, Ann Ganguza, and I am so excited to be here with a very special guest who is not only super uber talented, but one of my closest friends. Cristina Milizia is an award-winning bilingual voice actor and coach specializing in animation. She is a 2022 Voice Arts Award winner for Outstanding Animation Character, Film or TV, Best Voiceover, and is best known for voicing Annie and Amumu on League of Legends, Poison Ivy on Cartoon Network's DC Superhero Girls, Jessica Cruz for Lego DC, Carlitos on the Casagrandes, Teresa for Teresa for Barbie Mattel, and Baby Bottle on the Cuphead Show. And while most of you know her for her acting roles, guess what? She is also a badass entrepreneur and a boss like no other. And she's the founder of the GVAA and the creator of the GVAA Rate Guide. Cristina, I am so excited to finally have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Also, any excuse to get to be with Anne is like,
So awesome.
I feel so fancy with your introduction, so thank you.
That long list of credits is amazing. And I just want to reiterate, bosses out there, while most of you probably know her for her amazing acting abilities and her characters, I wanted to bring Cristina on because she truly is. She's a pioneer woman. She is an entrepreneur from, gosh knows, we've known each other for how long, Cristina, now? 10 years?
10 years about? Yeah, I think.
At least 10 years. And Cristina was like a baby when she started the GVAA. And there's nothing more entrepreneurial than just starting an online school. And then having the idea for the GVAA Rate Guide. So let's talk a little bit, maybe brush people up on your career, because you've been acting for you're like 12 and you've been acting for 31 years. At least, right?
I have been acting for 31 years, so I am about to be 40 on February 1st, so very shortly.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah, I know, that's a big one, 40.
Right?
So I'm feeling that one. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. But no, I started acting when I was about 8 years old. Again, my parents were musicians, so I was used to being on stage with them because they couldn't afford babysitters, so they were just like, hey kid, shake this maraca on stage, and that's what we did. So I learned to play all kinds of random instruments and sing 3-part harmony, and I got used to, from a very early age, just being like, and I say this to my students, you need to get used to being a dancing monkey to a certain degree, which is like, hey, time to dance. Okay.
Yes, I can do that.
Be ready to just go. And I had training really early on for just taking direction, performing on call, being on stage, which was an incredibly valuable skill set to have at an early age before you kind of get to that point where you're more self-conscious.
I was going to ask you, were you ever scared to be on stage or scared to perform? Or was it just because it was so ingrained at a young age? Did it just kind of happen?
No, I was never scared, again, because it just happened since I was so small that I just, it just seemed like part of my family life, along with sound checks and winding cable and everything else we did. It actually just got embarrassing when I got to 9 or 10 and my parents are performing at the school and I'm up there and I'm like, oh my God, please, all my friends are here. This is so embarrassing. I don't want to be your family is playing. And I'm just like, oh my God. So yeah, around between 8 and 12, I got embarrassed about it, and then I wouldn't play with them anymore. And I wanted to do my own thing. And I danced as well, and ended up dancing professionally for quite some time before I had an accident when I was 25 that made that no longer possible. So yeah, it was a very artistic upbringing. So that definitely prepped me for just being in the booth. And so when I started doing some voiceover, the very first audition I did, I booked, and it was with casting director named Ned Lott, who went on to cast for Miyazaki and Disney character voices. And yeah, he cast me in my very first job ever, and I still work with him, which is really cool.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And so your transition, I guess, when did you, I would say, transition full-time into voiceover?
Well, I was determined not to be an artist because my parents, were very much kind of starving musicians growing up, and it's a very difficult lifestyle. It's a very difficult profession to really make a full-time living in. And so I was determined not to do that. So I studied like statistics. I went to like the School of Management, and I was like, oh my God, no, I can't.
Not unlike being an entrepreneur, right? And having your own business. I mean, that's also, we're all kind of starving artists, aren't we, in our own right. But yeah, so you studied statistics and said,
Yep. And then I went to the School of Management. And actually, that was very helpful because even though I didn't stay there, I actually learned a lot about management and communication with teams and how to deliver messaging and communication and people management. And so that actually was very useful. Even though I didn't, complete my education there, I ended up going back to transfer to UC Berkeley and then studied theater. But having, dipping my toe in the business world and management was actually something that was very useful later on when starting GVAA.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about your career then, kind of full-time in voiceover before the GVAA. That would be, BGVAA. How long were you working and doing voiceover before you decided to start a business? And what was it that led you to actually want to start a business or an online school?
Well, so I did voiceover from 8 years old all the way through lower school, middle school, high school. Again, I just did it, on just here and there. It was never like a big deal. It was just something fun and a cool way to, I could make some money, and we saved it, or my parents would use it for things that I needed.
What type of jobs did you do at that age?
Oh, that's a really great question. I actually, the Bay Area, they have a very robust toy and game industry up there. And so all of my early work was toy work, toys and games. So Leapfrog is up there in Oakland.
Oh, yeah.
So I did a lot of work for Leapfrog, and then I worked for a company quite often called Creativity and the Music Annex, and they did a lot of work for just toy companies across the U.S. And I worked for another company called Shoot the Moon, and they did invention work where they would create concepts and then present them to the big toy companies to purchase them. So I did a lot of invention work. I did a lot of demo vocals as well. So they'd want to have a product or a toy where they'd have like a celebrity doing, the official voice of Barbie or whatever, singing it. But I was like the guide vocal.
Gotcha.
So I would do all the guide vocals, and I would go through all the revisions of the song to get it to the final form. And then they would give it to the celebrity, and they would listen to my voice as their guide vocal before they did the final thing. So
did they ever just pick you instead of the celebrity, or was it always the celebrity was because they wanted the marketing efforts, I guess, of the celebrity voice?
No, there were a few where they, I actually did get cast and I got to do that, but it was actually fantastic training for animation because a lot of these toy products are from animation sources, like Elmo and Barbie and Dora. And so I had to do a lot of voice matching. So
got it.
So it was actually great training because I had to mimic these characters and get as close as I could to have the client feel what the product was going to be like. So I
really got that into character then, as well as,
Yeah, so and I tell people all the time, toy work is fantastic training for animation in terms of just how the level of skill required in terms of what I kind of call vocal gymnastics, really, mimicry, really wide-ranging characters, really big characters that are very silly. I've been asked to do very, very silly things. And again, just very, singing a song in pig or in chicken. I had to do a whole song where it was a whole, it was great. We did all the notes where it was we did and then they'd make music out of it, and it was wild. It was just crazy stuff sometimes. And so there was just already a level of silliness that translated so well into animation later because I was just not shy about. If you're going to ask me to do some crazy thing, I'm like, yeah, sure. All right, let's go for it.
How do you embody the pig singing? How does that work? How do you do that? How do you get yourself into that character? Absolutely. I can totally see that as helping you in why, and also why you're so successful as a character actress today.
Thank you. And I think that it actually, one of the areas of animation that I've really started transferring in more lately in the past year or two has been creature work. And it's been gibberish kind of, or emotive animals or mystical pets or things that are just just where it's just there's no words, but it's just an emotional performance with where it's you can hear a message that is being but there's no words to it, and that's it's a very freeing art form that it's just, again, you have to be willing to just let whatever come out of your mouth
absolutely
come out of your mouth.
Absolutely.
And that's been really cool. So
and I would imagine that also allowed you to really delve into a lot of different ranges for your vocal performances as well. Because I know for a fact that you did a lot of little girl baby voices and for the toys. And so now, I guess evolving into creature work, you get to do all sorts of ranges of different and I always think that vocal placement and understanding where sounds are coming from and where your voice is coming from is so important in delivering different performances.
Yeah, the baby stuff really was. I originally started as little girl stuff. That was that's really cute. I got to my game down if I'm going to do that. But it started with just little girl stuff all the time, and then I just got younger and younger and younger and. And then went into the baby stuff, and that turned into whatever, just really crazy. So yeah, I don't know, it just kind of evolved. People just kept asking me to go higher and higher, and I was like, okay.
Now what about lower and lower?
Yeah, we've done that too. As my voice is matured. It did get lower. But yeah, so now I'll do stuff more like down here, and so I can do my more big girl voice, and then if we want to get really crazy, we'll do weird stuff like that too.
That's awesome. So. I know that I fully have to take advantage of my morning voice if somebody wants me at a lower register.
Right.
And then also being able to get yourself down to that place if you can after you've been voicing for hours is that's another skill. That's another skill set. Yeah. So you tell us all about your claim to fame, League of Legends. Was that your first big gig and as a character, as a major character?
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. I think that was in 2009, and I was the very first, there were two characters that were introduced in the very beginning, and one I believe was Rise and the other one was Annie, and that was me. So a lot of people have a lot of nostalgia for Annie because she's also one of the very first characters that you get when you play, and so she's, again, nostalgia people, she's one of the first characters that you get to play with, and so a lot of people have a very attachment to her. And there's also an enormous statue of Annie and Amumu at Riot Games, which is amazing. That blew my mind the first time I saw it. But yes, that was definitely the first big thing. But when it was done, it was, it was nothing. It was not a known game. It was an unknown game. I was one of the first two people to do it. And so I did it and promptly forgot about it. Never heard anything about it again. Because I didn't know that it had become anything. And they give us code names. I didn't even know the name of the game.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't even know what game it was. And so when it came out, did you know that it had come out?
No idea.
Wow.
No idea. I didn't know until I met my husband. And that was in 2012. So it was like 3 years later. He actually works at Riot. He worked at Riot Games at the time, working on League of Legends. And we were on our first date, and I laughed. And he said, "Your voice sounds really familiar."
Oh my gosh! How do I not know this story, Cristina? I should know this story.
It was part of the magic of our first date. And he was like, "Your voice sounds really familiar. Have you ever done anything for Riot Games?" And I was like, "I don't know. Let me check my resume." And I looked, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm some character named Annie and Amumu," and I mispronounced it. And he was like, "You're Annie?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then he told me, he's like, "Your voice is famous all over the world." And I was like,
"Wow,
that character
you really
is famous."
Didn't know.
No, and I thought he was just blowing smoke too.
Yeah.
I thought he was just trying to
first date. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was trying to butter me up or I thought maybe he had a small cult following somewhere or something. And he was like, "No, go look it up." And I was like...
And so it never occurred to you to look it up because you weren't necessarily, let's say, a gamer at the time, or, what was... Because you were on to other roles, or what happened? Just
well, to
probably
be honest,
forgot about it.
I didn't even know the name of the game.
Right.
So I didn't even
And
know
they
what
never
to
told
look
you.
for.
Okay.
Yeah, like they didn't tell you later. So I knew I was someone called Annie.
Right.
Like that's not a very, and a Mumu is more specific. But again, there are so many games that you do, and then they just either don't become anything, or they're small and they don't. And I wasn't doing big games at that time. I was doing smaller, more mobile games, toys. I wasn't used to anything really going on a very large scale. So that was definitely my very first big thing that I didn't even know had become a big thing until I met my husband.
Wow.
So and that's been the funniest part, is that my laugh is Annie's laugh. Just higher pitched. And one of my favorite moments ever is that I was at the airport getting off a flight, and I was just in the airport, and I laughed about something. And then all of a sudden, I hear this person, and they're all, Annie? Annie?
I love it.
Annie! And they start running around the airport. Like, we see this person running, trying to find, they're like, Annie! Like,
oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh my God.
Did you answer?
Yes. And I said, like, League of Legends, Annie? They were like, yes! And they were like, you're Annie! And then we had to, like, sit down and have a conversation. And I had never been recognized by my laugh at an airport. It just blew my mind. And so that was, like...
That's how you knew you were kind of famous.
Well, but it's fun because it's just the voice. Like, if I hadn't laughed, no one would know. And that was, like, my big, like, celebrity moment where I felt important.
Well, that was the beginning of them, right? Because then, and I know how hard you've worked. I mean, having known you, like, literally, I met you, I think, right after you got married. Like maybe a year after you got married. And so we have known each other for 10 years. And I know how hard you have worked to just make a space and to really claim your talents, which I always knew were amazing, in the animation space. And you've gone on to these amazing roles. I mean, and what was your evolution for that? Like talk about your ethic, because one thing before I talk about your entrepreneurial ethic and getting into GVAA was you were focused. I remember you saying you were just focused on wanting to really do well in animation. So talk to us a little bit about that.
I think I'd been doing toys for so many years at that point. And I'd literally done toy work for every company in the US. And the skill set was so close to animation, but the truth of the matter is that toy work doesn't pay very well. Right. And it's almost completely and now it is completely non-union, I believe. And it was then as well. A lot of it was non-union. And it's not a robust industry. They don't make a lot of money, and that's why you see a lot of toy companies branching into animation in order to survive. Like Mattel having to go into animation now, even live action films. That was a big change in the industry, is because kids didn't want toys anymore. They wanted iPhones. They wanted all
and technology.
Right, exactly.
To survive, they had to evolve with technology. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so toy work really it was not high-paying work, even though it was fun and even though it was, but also toy work is not, in terms of acting, nearly as demanding or deep. It's fun, it's great, it's educational, it's cute, but you really have most like, can you find the red ball? Yeah. Great job. It's not like, meatier roles with deeper
in-depth acting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I knew that vocally I could do it, and so I just made this resolution that I was going to work for Disney, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon, and that was like.
And your overnight success took how long? Because I'm always about that. My overnight success took at least 10 years.
Right. Well, I arrived in LA in 2012, and I don't think I booked my first animation job until probably 2016, 2015, 2016, and that was the beginning. So it took a good 3 years, 3 or 4 years before I really actually started booking animation.
Auditioning, and you had a great agent at the time, which I think had a lot of faith and a belief in you, and I think we're probably, I would say, fairly significant in terms of your growth in that area. Would you say that?
Yeah, no, I had a wonderful agent who believed in me, and he actually, I actually went with him from one agency to another agency that had more animation connections, and we had an honest conversation, and he told me, he said, honestly, at the other agency, you weren't making me any money. He said, I feel like it's because you weren't getting the animation shots that you should be getting.
Got it.
And that has to do, do with the relationship that the agents have with the animation studios.
Right.
And so when he took me to AVO with him, he said, I think you and Sandy are going to do really well. And Sandy is one of the best animation agents in the country, and that's when things just exploded.
But what a credit to, what we're always telling voice actors and voice talent is to really develop those relationships, with your agents and how they can really help you to blossom. And I think the two of you working together can really help to move careers forward. And it's so important, because maybe had you not had, that good of a relationship, you wouldn't have sat down and had that talk, and you wouldn't have moved over to a different agency that gave you different opportunities. So I love that you said that. So let's continue to talk. I think around that time, you probably also had the idea for the GVAA. So your little entrepreneurial mind was like, okay, I don't have enough yet, enough on my plate, but let's do something else, right?
Well, I think I actually started GVAA sooner than that. I started GVAA. It was, it was like 2013, I think.
Okay.
2013, 2014. It was, so before I started booking a lot in animation.
Oh, okay.
I was coaching because I had coached for many years at Voice One in San Francisco, toys and games. And that's because I had also worked as a casting director for a production company for toys and games. And so, so I was not only an actor for it, I did casting. So I taught classes for Elaine Clark at Voice One. And so I was taking some private students, and I was getting these students who had just been put through, well, I don't know how else to call it, but a demo mill, or these weekends where they're like, become a voice actor in a weekend and make your demo, and people who had invested large amounts of money and were completely unprepared, and they didn't understand why they weren't booking.
Sure.
And I was seeing it more and more, and it was so devastating to me. And I remember one man in particular, he had come to me, had spent like $5,000 or something on all his demos and a new website. And he was like, I don't know why I'm not booking. And I listened to his stuff, and he had a lisp. He had a speech impediment, nothing that's going to, ruin everything. That can be corrected and things can be worked on. But nobody said anything to him.
Yeah.
And I, and I had a lisp growing up, and it again, it's something I had to work on and correct. So it's not like the end of your life if that happens, but it does need to be addressed, because you will book more if you don't have one in certain areas, commercial narration.
Absolutely.
And that's just what it is. And he was so devastated. He had no idea that he had a lisp. And he was so sad at the end of that call. And then I was so angry that somebody had done this. And that's when I was like, I'm going to start, I knew all these wonderful coaches from Voice One. I knew, Elaine Clark and David Rosenthal and Doug Honoroff, again, fantastic coaches. And I said, there are great coaches out there. There needs to be a resource. There needs to be a place where people can access quality coaches that are not going to lie to them, that are going to give them, the real information they need to succeed. And that's when I started that. And David Rosenthal reached out to me and said he wanted to be a part of it. And we shared the same dream. And then we just took off together. And he was wonderful, because again, I was only like 28
You're like
at the
12.
time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was
You're
very
so young.
I was little. I mean, it's not that little, but 28, maybe 29.
I just jest, but you were very young and very ambitious. And I remember when I met you. Do you remember how we met? How we got connected?
Oh my gosh, I don't.
Somehow the name Dave Cavassier, it just, right? Doesn't that just comes to mind? I believe that he introduced us via email. And we met probably 2013, somewhere along when you first began GVAA. And bosses out there, if you did not know, I was a coach for GVAA in the very beginning and loved my experience. Worked with amazing people, Cristina, of course, and David. And really, I saw the whole online school blossom. And so I love, Cristina, when we would work together. I mean, you really, I think, I think was in the true spirit of entrepreneurship, right? Was you were willing to learn as you went. You were willing to try things. You were willing to listen to the people that you believed in, that worked for you, and took, would ask advice, and literally built that from the ground up yourself, I'm going to say, along with probably David, but I think in the very beginning, it was all you, really trying to create something for the good of the community, which is something that I love. And I was very proud to work for GVAA. And it was my honor to, whenever you would ask me a question, like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this? And I also remember the rate guide, which is so instrumental. I mean, we're talking, you're a pioneer woman. I always consider Elaine Clark a pioneer woman as well.
She was really one of my biggest inspirations for doing it.
She's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful. And I like to consider myself a bit of a pioneer myself. But also just for you to be able to say, look, this is what's needed in the community. This is a resource that's needed. And then to evolve that into a school where you hired, I mean, literally, you were still a voice actor and you literally were running a business. You were hiring people. You were paying people. You established an online school, which at the time was not something that existed. And there was coaches that were out there, but there was no real website out there, I remember, that where you could actually go and say, oh, I want this coach, or I want to learn this, and let me pay for it here, or let me do this here. And so everything was advanced for its age in 2013, just because it didn't exist before. And so I consider to be one of the pioneers of those technologies, of having online schools and having them be successful, something that people can trust. And then, let alone the rate guide. Let's talk about, first of all, what were your challenges in building GVAA? And then what was it that led to the evolution of the rate guide?
I think in the beginning, the very beginning, it was actually Jonah Rosenthal, David Rosenthal's son, was one of the very first people who helped me put together, and a wonderful woman as well, who was an assistant to me, just putting in just all the content, building the website, building, all of that stuff. And then David Rosenthal, of course, as well, through every aspect of it. And that was just getting, again, all the content in there, organizing everything, how we were going to do all of it. And again, the biggest motivation was just, I felt like there was just this tremendous social injustice, that there was just, and I wanted to protect people because again, I'd also grown up very poor, and it really bothers me when people are being taken advantage of. It's so wrong. So yes, and we definitely were one of the very first. And David actually had something called Online Voiceover Coach, where he had also started going in that direction, which was one of the reasons why when we kind of merged our ideas, he already was right there with the mentality of how we're going to do this. He was absolutely, and having you and bringing on all these people that had so much more experience, because I had the original vision, but there were so many people that were aligned with that vision and had more life experience, more experience coaching, more experience
I had run VO Peeps as well, so I had run some online things, educationally based, and I had also worked for some other institutions, some other coaching institutions, but nothing as large as the GVAA, really trying to bring together all different genres and all different coaches.
Right. So I got a lot of advice from you, from David, and I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, I think people have this idea of what leadership is, that you have power and whatever else. And the truth is that leaders eat last. Your job is to serve. Your job is to serve everyone else. You come last, putting their ideas first, listening, staying calm, being humble, trying to keep a cool head and having a larger vision of things. It is not easy to be a leader. And I think at that point, it's very hard. And you really have to have self-control, in terms of, emotionally and, sorting through everything.
And you have to have courage. And I love that you said that, leaders, it's not about the leader. It's about, who they're serving. And you read any good book on leadership, and that's like first and foremost, really, is that, one of the biggest the best things you can do as a leader is to put together a team that supports you and that is amazing at what they do and can even be better than you in all those areas. And working together, that's what creates a successful business and a successful team together.
Yep, and I asked questions of Elaine. She was very, very helpful in the beginning. I looked up to her very much. You, David, a number of our other coaches, and because I knew that I had a lot to learn. And again, I had the passion, I had the drive, I had the vision, I had the desire to create this, but you have to reach out to the people to fill in those holes. And you can't just try to assume you know how to do it all yourself because you have to take advantage of the resources around you. So it was a very humbling experience, and and in the process, it started to do really well. We started going to conferences and presenting, which was wonderful. And then at one of the conferences, I don't remember if it was at the conference or perhaps before, but I had connected with David Toback and I was mentoring him. He had come to me for some advice. And so I was either coaching him or mentoring him, and he had decided that he wanted to make a little rate card for himself for his website to kind of just establish his rates, which I thought was very smart. And he showed it to me, and Toback is excellent with organization. He's very detail oriented, and it was just beautiful. Like, it was just beautifully laid out, and I was like, this is fantastic. I was like, this is great. And I was just like, I suddenly had this vision of doing this on a much larger scale, and there was a reason for this too, and I had actually just had an experience not long before this happened where I had been hired for an animation show where I found out later that they had let go of their cast that they were paying like I think it was like, I can't remember the exact number, but like a normal animation rate, but non-union. And then they had decided to hire all new actors at half the rate. And I was one of those actors. And this was through an agency.
Wow.
And I was just, I was like, oh, it's one of my first animation jobs. I'm so excited. I've just been doing toys for so long. I'm just excited. And then I found out later what had happened, and I didn't even understand really the dynamics of any of this, and that, and even though I had been hired to be a different character, it was still the fact that, they were trying to hold the line of, no, this is the rate that we're going to ask for, we're going to walk. And the company was just like, well, bye, I'm going to recast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, and then me being, I had a lot of experience as a voice actor, but I was hired. And again, I'm just all starry-eyed because it's my first animation job, which happens to every voice actor. You get everybody. Mm-hmm. You're starry-eyed and oh my God, it's my first job. That's absolutely what
happens. Yep. And I remember that at the time happening a lot, and there being at least the starting of some discussions, because even Facebook groups at that time hadn't really materialized. I know I had one for VO Peeps, and then there weren't like there are today. There weren't groups that could discuss those things, but it was one of the things that people were starting to discuss, including rates. It's one of the reasons why people would say, do we publish our rate guides online on our website? That was a big question of the day. And I remember there was a discussion about that, but I also then remember just at in the beginning of it, when people would talk about, oh my gosh, like here are actors trying to stand their ground and get paid a fair rate. And, the company just saying, well, that's okay, see ya. And then hiring, starry-eyed, voice actors at half the rate. And I remember that being an issue. And here you go, wanting to take a stand about that. And I think that's wonderful.
Well, and this was also the time, my husband reminded me, we were discussing this before I came on today, that this was also the time that this was really the rise of the pay-to-plays. This was the time when Voices.com and Voice 123, they were just taking over, and rates were just plummeting. Plummeting. And so in the midst of all this, and I was just watching more and more work go non-union because I'm FICOR, so I see union and non-union work. ToyWorks is exclusively non-union, so I wasn't going to go full union. I was going to be FICOR, so I didn't lose my toy work that I needed at the time, which was my only income, aside from my, 1 or 2 animation jobs, which I was starting to get. And I was like, I just felt like I was watching my industry fall apart, and everything that I had worked hard to try to get out of, which was just these little tiny non-union job rates, and being taken advantage of many times in my career up until this point. And I was like, no, I don't want this to happen to any other talented people that are coming in this where maybe they have a strong performance background, strong acting background, they're a trained opera singer, whatever, and so they do a great job, but they have no idea what they should be paid for that skill set, and they're just excited to be on a show, and it happens every day. And so when he showed me this little guide, I was like, you know what, this is what we need this for the non-union world.
Absolutely. And you know what's funny is that when there was all the discussion about the rate cards, like, do we publish our rate cards? Everybody at the time was saying, well, okay, what's the benchmark? There is no, is there a benchmark? What should I charge? And especially, for all of the non-union stuff that I was doing, corporate work, explainer work, e-learning work, everybody would say, well, what do you charge? What do you charge? And they'd say, how do we even know? What's the benchmark? And when we were all back in the day, before there was a big band of, and there was the GVAA rate guide, there was a bunch of us that used to talk to one another and say, well, here is what I charge, but I'm not going to publish it on my website because, every job is different. However, it's always good, especially for anybody new, and I still find this to be the case whenever I have a new student and they're like, oh my God, I just, somebody just asked me what I would charge for this e-learning job or for this corporate job, and what do I do? And you get into that panic and you have no reference. You have nothing to look at to even benchmark your pricing on. And I'm so glad that the GVAA rate guide was started, because it gave us something other than SAG-AFTRA, okay? Because SAG-AFTRA is what we were looking at, but SAG-AFTRA didn't have rates for e-learning, really. It was one of those things where it was just a bunch of us who did a bunch of it, and we would talk amongst each other, and you were actually asking all those people, including myself, like, what do you charge? And so it was great. You were able to bring together everybody at the time to really get a good set of data for this rate guide. And it literally is iconic now in the industry. I mean, I say this over and over again. How many times do people reference the GVAA rate guide? And I'm so proud to know you, Christine. I'm so proud that you did this back then, and knowing it would be a good resource for the community. And it's really just become legendary today. It's epic. It's the GVAA rate guide. I mean, it's its own entity now. It should have its own website, just for the usefulness and functionality of it.
And we have more plans for it. And first of all, I just want to say, too, that a lot of people don't know the original story of the rate guide. And so I was really excited to talk about it with you today, because what happened after Toback showed me that little card is I said, hey, Toback, will you please come work with me? Work for GVAA. I want to build this for every area of voiceover, because exactly what you said, that the union didn't talk about. I don't think they talk about telephony. They don't talk about all of these other areas. And so I literally I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of coaches, and I just started making phone calls. And I spent a lot of time with you. I spent a lot of time with Josh at Go Voices, Eric Shepard at Shepard Agency, wonderful agents. And I did actually spend some time with union workers as well, who explained their rate structures, and I tried to translate it kind of in a non-union format for different areas. And all those people generously gave their time to build this.
Because we all believed in it. I remember at the time we all believed in it. We all said, yes, this is exactly what's needed. This is what's needed in the industry.
And there were so many areas. It was like, so we were like, well, what do we do if I'm doing an airport announcement? I'm like, I have no idea. Let me go look. Lobby. I'm being played in a lobby of a dentist's office. I'm like, let me go research that. And what if I'm a voice in a card that opens up and sings something? I'm like,
a Hallmark card.
Right. That's okay. And so it was just, and so we got this barrage of people just asking, and so it was built, and it was so much so quickly that unfortunately I burned out a little bit, and I burned out, and because I was getting emails and messages and messenger notices at all times
at this point,
day.
I know as a coach, let alone, before the GVA rate guide, I know as a coach, Oh my goodness. When you set your students out into the world of working in voiceover, and they've got their coaching, they've got a demo, and then all of a sudden that first job, request comes in, or how much would it cost? They flock to the people like insane, and just panic. Oh my God, what do I charge? Oh my God, what do I charge? Oh my God, what do I charge? What do I charge for this? So I know you on a grand scale were being barraged, because I was being barraged before the GVAA rate guide existed, and it became like one of those things where it's like I'd love to help you, but I cannot answer you in this next second.
Right, at 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what is so wonderful about having that as a resource. And congratulations on that. I mean, really, it was just it's a wonderful, wonderful resource for the community. And I'm just so proud to have been a small part of it back in the day, and so proud of you, and so proud of GVAA, and just, guys, bosses, this is a badass entrepreneur right here. She's a VO boss, and you may not even have known that, but I am bringing that to light now, and shouting it from the rooftops. So, Cristina, it's been amazing. How can people, if people need to get in touch with you, because I know you're coaching a lot now and you're high in demand, but how can people get in touch with you if they need to?
So I am very excited to be coaching again. I took a long break just to focus on animation, but now I am back, and I feel like I have so much more information to share, which is really exciting. You can find me at globalvoiceacademy.com. That's the website. If you look up GVAA rate guide, it's all connected on there too. If that's already in your normal search engine, it's all connected. You'll see under one-on-one coaching that I'm there. I focus on animation, character work in general, toys, video games, and career strategy, things of that nature. Now that I'm back from my break, also you can expect some really cool stuff that we're going to be doing the rate guide. We have plans for adding a whole much larger animation, non-union animation section very soon. Looking into doing research right now on audio description as well, which is a new area that's really exploding as well.
Yeah.
And if people do have other areas that they would like to see on the rate guide, you can also reach out to us at globalvoiceacademy.com. Let us know if there's stuff missing on there that you'd like to see, because we definitely have big plans to continue growing it. And as I think it was Tim Friedlander who told me, or maybe it was at the Navigala, that 80% of voiceover work is now non-union. I believe that is
absolutely.
And so I am as dedicated to this project as ever. I took my little break, and now I'm back, and I'm here for the community, and I want us all to rise and support each other and be able to fight for what we're worth. So,
well, thank you, Cristina, so much for that. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can only hope to have many more conversations with you in the future.
Me too.
For the podcast. And so, bosses, here's your chance to use your voice to make an immediate difference in our world and give back to the communities, just like GVAA and Cristina Milizia have done. Give back to the communities that give to you. Visit 100voiceswhocare.org to commit. And also, big shout out to our sponsor, IPDTL. You too can connect and network like bosses, like Cristina and myself. Find out more at ipdtl.com. You guys have an amazing week. I love you, Cristina, and we will see you next week.
I love you. Bye.
Bye.